Night is the time when silence grows the loudest. Most people think of it as peaceful, but for those who work the graveyard shift or simply find themselves awake past midnight, night can turn into something far more unsettling. An empty hotel lobby, a deserted gas station, or even the stillness of your own home can become a stage for something you don't understand. Shadows move differently, eyes seem to follow, and sometimes you realize the fear you feel isn't in your head. It's real and it's watching you. Part 1. The Stranger Who Never Checked In. Every hotel has stories, but the night she realized one of her guests never checked into his room, she discovered some stories are meant to stay untold. The hotel sat by the edge of a deserted highway, where cars passed like ghosts and the world seemed to forget the place even existed. For the young clerk, the job was dull but simple: hand out keys, log the bookings, and wait for the hours to crawl by until morning. That night, the lobby clock ticked past midnight, and the silence thickened like a blanket pressing against her chest. Around 11 p.m., a tall, thin man had checked in, requesting room 214. His skin looked pale under the fluorescent light, his voice low, and his stare unsettlingly direct. He carried no luggage, only an old wallet with a faded ID card that felt rough and brittle in her hands, like paper that had survived a fire. He hardly spoke, just nodded, and took the keycard without another word. She thought it strange but not impossible. Plenty of late-night travelers came through, each with their own oddness. But when she absent-mindedly refreshed the system later, her stomach turned cold. Room 214 still showed vacant. The keycard hadn't been used, which meant the man had never gone upstairs. She leaned back in her chair, eyes sweeping the empty lobby, when her breath caught in her throat. He was sitting there again. Not at the counter this time, but across the room in one of the leather chairs, his body perfectly upright, facing the dead television. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, but he didn't move, not even to breathe, it seemed. Forcing a shaky smile, she called out, asking if everything was all right, but the man gave no sign he had heard her. No nod, no word, nothing. The only sound was the buzzing fluorescent light above them. Her unease sharpened into fear when she checked the security monitor. Hours of grainy black and white footage showed him wandering the hallways. He never entered a room. He only stopped outside random doors, standing there with his head tilted slightly, as though listening for something or someone. On the screen, his face looked blurred, the camera refusing to capture him clearly. Sometimes he stood frozen in one place for so long, she wondered if the recording had paused. Panic rushed through her. She dialed her manager, voice trembling, but he only muttered, half asleep, that the man was probably drunk and she should ignore him. Useless. She hung up, heart hammering, and looked back at the monitor, just in time to see the man standing outside room 109, pressed so close to the door that his shadow seemed to seep under it. She whispered to herself, trying to calm down, "Just call the police. Just call them." But before her fingers could finish dialing, the sound of footsteps echoed in the lobby. Slow, deliberate. She lifted her eyes and nearly screamed. He was back, walking straight toward her counter, his head tilted, his eyes locked onto hers as though he had been waiting for this moment all along. He leaned forward, his breath icy against her cheek, and in a low whisper he asked, "Do you have food?" The words shouldn't have chilled her, but the way he said them made her feel as if they meant something else entirely. Her throat went dry. She pointed shakily to the vending machine, silently begging him to walk away. But he didn't. His gaze remained unblinking, as if he were memorizing her face. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, the automatic doors slid open with a rush of cold air. She turned toward the sound of 2 police officers stepping in, relief flooding her chest. She spun back to the counter to point them toward the man, but the chair was empty. He was gone, vanished. The lobby was silent again, save for her own ragged breathing. The officers searched every corner of the hotel, every hallway, every locked storage room, but there was no trace. No footprints, no movement, no sign he had ever been there at all. Later, when she checked the system again, the record of his check-in had disappeared as if it had never existed. The ID he gave her was fake, the name on it meaningless, and yet she knew he had been there, watching, listening, waiting, and worst of all, something told her that he hadn't left at all.
Not real.
Part 2, Whispers, in the hallway. She thought the worst was over when the police left, but that night the real horror began, not in the lobby, but in the hallways, where unseen voices waited in the dark. After the police left, the young clerk tried to steady her hands by gripping the edge of the counter until her knuckles went white. The night air outside was still, the hum of insects loud through the glass doors, but inside the hotel it felt even quieter, too quiet, like the building itself was holding its breath. She told herself the man was gone, that maybe he had been nothing more than a disturbed wanderer with a fake ID. But when she sat back down and glanced again at the monitor, her blood ran cold. The cameras, all 6 of them, were flickering. Not out of focus this time, flickering, as though someone was passing in front of them, though no one appeared on screen. The one outside room 109 showed the door handle twitching ever so slightly, moving like invisible fingers were brushing it. She stood, her legs trembling, and decided to check the hallway herself. With the lobby bathed in artificial light, she pushed open the service door and stepped into the corridor, instantly swallowed by shadows and the faint smell of damp carpet. Every door looked the same, shut tight, but her ears picked up something faint. Whispers. Not clear words, but the sound of voices layered together like dozens of people whispering secrets just out of reach. Her breath caught. She walked slowly, her shoes barely making a sound, and the voices seemed to shift, always coming from the next corner, always pulling her deeper into the hallway. She stopped outside room 109, the door she had seen on the monitor. The handle wasn't moving now, but as she leaned closer, the whispering grew louder, and this time she caught fragments. Her name. Not once, but over and over, as if 50 different mouths were murmuring it from inside.
Emily, Emily.
Come closer. She staggered back, heart racing, whispering to herself, No!
No, this isn't real.
Suddenly a loud bang erupted from inside the room, as if heavy furniture had been thrown against the door. She screamed and stumbled backward, dropping her phone, which slid across the carpet into the darkness. She bent down to grab it, her fingers brushing the cold screen, when she noticed bare feet on the carpet, just inches from her face.
She froze.
Slowly, she lifted her head and saw the man, the same one from the lobby, standing silently in the hallway, his head tilted downward, staring at her with lifeless eyes. His lips parted, and in that same chilling tone he whispered,
You shouldn't be here. She scrambled to her feet,
bolting toward the stairwell, but the lights overhead began flickering violently, casting the hall in bursts of shadow and light. Each flicker revealed him closer, 10 feet away, 5 feet, then right behind her. She slammed the stairwell door shut and tumbled down the steps, breath ragged, knees scraped. Reaching the ground floor, she burst through the emergency exit into the parking lot. Cold night air slapped her skin, and for a moment she felt safe. But when she turned toward the glass lobby doors, her heart stopped. He was inside, standing at the counter where she had been moments before, staring out at her through the glass. She blinked once, twice, and he was gone. She ran to her car, fumbling for her keys, only to remember she had left them in the break room.
Panic crushed her chest.
She had to go back inside. But when she turned toward the hotel again, every single light in the building flickered out, plunging it into total blackness. The whispers returned, louder this time, carried out of the hallways and into the night air, wrapping around her like invisible hands. And in that moment, she realized the man wasn't just a guest. He was part of the building,
part of the silence, and he wasn't alone.
Part 3, the locked room. She thought running outside had saved her, but the real nightmare waited upstairs, behind a door that no guest was ever supposed to open. Emily's chest burned from the cold air as she stood in the empty parking lot, staring at the hotel swallowed in darkness. The building loomed like a hollow shell, its windows reflecting nothing but her trembling figure. For a moment she considered leaving, just walking down the deserted highway until sunrise, but she knew she couldn't. Her belongings, her car keys, everything she needed was still inside. Worse, she couldn't shake the feeling that if she turned her back now, the man, or whatever he was, would follow her into the night. Swallowing her fear, she forced herself back through the emergency door. The instant she stepped inside, the lights overhead flickered back to life one by one, humming as if the building itself had been waiting for her return. The lobby looked untouched, eerily normal, but her skin crawled as though she were being watched from every corner. She reached the break room and grabbed her keys, but when she turned to leave, something caught her eye on the monitor wall. One camera feed was clear now, sharper than it had ever been. It showed the door to room 214, the room the man had supposedly checked into, and the door was wide open. She froze, staring at the grainy image. She remembered how the system had shown the room as vacant, how he'd never entered. And yet, there it was, open, like it had been waiting all along.
Against every instinct screaming inside her, she found her feet moving down the hallway, each step heavier than the last.
The whispers had stopped, replaced by silence so thick it pressed against her ears. When she reached the door to 214, it stood ajar, darkness spilling out like ink. She hesitated, her fingers trembling on the frame, before slowly pushing it open. The air inside was freezing, colder than outside, and the smell hit her instantly, damp, rotten, like waterlogged wood. The room was bare. No bed, no furniture, nothing but 4 stained walls and the sound of dripping water echoing from nowhere. She stepped inside, her shoes crunching against broken glass littering the floor. In the corner, etched deep into the wall, were dozens of names carved into the plaster, some faded, some fresh. And among them, her own name, Emily, scratched over and over again as if someone had been waiting for her. Her breath came fast, tears stinging her eyes. She backed away, but the door slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. She screamed and pulled at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The lights flickered, and suddenly she wasn't alone. In the far corner, half shrouded in darkness, stood the man. His body seemed taller now, distorted, his limbs too long, his head bent at an unnatural angle. He didn't move, didn't blink. He only stared at her as if she had finally stepped where she wasn't supposed to. Then, in one smooth motion, his voice filled the room. Not from his mouth, but from the walls themselves, a chorus of whispers echoing her name. She pressed her hands against her ears, but the sound drilled straight into her skull. The walls seemed to breathe, closing in, and she realized the names carved around her weren't just markings, they were a list of people who had stood where she stood, trapped in that same room, with him. She fell to her knees, clawing at the door, her throat raw from screaming. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped. The lights went out. She was swallowed in total darkness, and the last thing she heard was the sound of footsteps slowly crossing the room toward her, deliberate and patient, as though he had all the time in the world. Part 4, The Hotel's Secret. She thought she was trapped with him, but the truth was darker. The entire hotel was a trap.
And she was just the next name on its wall. Dark swallowed her whole.
So thick, it felt like a physical weight pressing against her chest. Emily clawed at the walls, fingers scraping over the carved names, feeling the grooves dig into her skin. She whispered to herself, begging it to be a dream, but the sound of those slow, deliberate footsteps told her it was anything but. Then flicker. The light returned for the briefest second, and in that instant she saw him standing inches away, his face stretched in a smile that was wrong, too wide, his teeth sharp and blackened like rotting wood. She screamed, slamming herself against the door, and with a sudden crack it burst open. She fell into the hallway, gasping for breath, her palms bleeding. The corridor was silent, the whispers gone, but something about the air felt heavier. She staggered back to the lobby, desperate to call for help, but every phone she picked up spat nothing but static. Desperate, she pulled the old logbook from under the counter, an ancient record of every guest who had ever stayed. The pages were stained, the ink faded, but one thing made her heart stop. Dozens of names, handwritten in shaky letters, all listed under room 214, and every name was crossed out. She flipped frantically through the pages, her pulse racing, until she found something worse. New pages, empty ones, where the ink was still wet. Her own name was already written there, with tonight's date beside it. Her throat tightened as realization dawned. This wasn't just about the man. The entire hotel was part of it, feeding on the people who came through, swallowing them whole.
Room 214 wasn't a room, it was a doorway.
She heard a creak above her, the groan of old wood, and looked up just in time to see black liquid dripping from the ceiling, thick and tar-like. It landed on the counter, sizzling as though alive, and began to spread across the surface, inching toward her. She stumbled back, clutching the logbook, when the automatic doors of the lobby slid open on their own. A rush of freezing air swept inside, and with it, the faint outline of dozens of figures appeared outside in the parking lot. Men, women, children, all standing perfectly still in the moonlight, their faces pale and expressionless, like guests waiting for check-in. One of them stepped forward, and she recognized the tall man from before. But now, behind him, she could see others, people whose names she had just read in the book. Guests who had disappeared returned as something else. The glass doors slid shut again, trapping her inside, and she realized with terror that the hotel wasn't keeping her prisoner by accident. It had chosen her. She tried to run toward the stairwell, but the lobby lights flickered violently, and when they steadied, the man was already inside, standing by the desk, closer than before. His voice echoed, layered with dozens of others. As he said, "You signed in, Emily, now you can never leave." Her knees buckled as the walls of the lobby began to shift. Stretching taller, the floor beneath her trembling like the building itself was alive. She clutched the logbook to her chest, whispering a prayer, but deep down she knew prayers had no place here. This wasn't a haunting. It was a feeding ground. And the hotel was still hungry. Part 5, the last checkout. She thought she could escape if she ran, but in the end, the hotel didn't want her to leave. It wanted her to stay forever. Emily's chest heaved as the walls groaned around her. The logbook still clutched in her hands like a lifeline. The lobby seemed to shift with every blink, stretching and distorting as if she were standing inside a giant breathing lung. The figures outside pressed closer against the glass, their pale faces tilting in unison, eyes empty, yet locked onto her. She backed away, whispering, "This isn't real." This isn't real, but the words felt hollow. The tall man stepped forward, his form phasing through the sliding doors without touching them. His footsteps echoed unnaturally loud on the tile floor, each one shaking her bones. He extended his hand toward the logbook, his long fingers curling like claws. "It belongs to us," he said, though his lips never moved. His voice came from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, from everywhere at once. Emily's mind screamed at her to run, but her body refused to obey. Finally, she bolted for the stairwell, clutching the book, her shoes slapping against the tile. She climbed 2 steps at a time, the sound of dozens of footsteps following her, though she never dared to look back. By the time she reached the 2nd floor, the hallway had changed, longer, darker, stretching into infinity. Every door she passed was ajar, and from each one came whispers, moans, and the faint sound of scratching nails. She tried one handle after another, but every room revealed only the same thing: emptiness. No bed, no furniture, just bare walls carved with names.
All different, all crossed out.
Her name appeared again and again, fresh this time, as if being etched into the plaster while she watched. Terror clawed at her chest. She stumbled toward the farthest end of the hallway, where a faint glow of red light bled from under a door. The number on it made her stomach drop, 214. Against her better judgment, she pushed it open. Instead of a room, she found herself in the lobby again, standing behind the front desk exactly where she had started. The clock on the wall now read 11 p.m., the same time the man had first checked in. Her hands trembled as she flipped open the logbook, and her blood ran cold. The entries had changed. The last name listed wasn't hers, it was a new one. Someone else's. The front doors hissed open, and she looked up to see a weary traveller dragging a suitcase inside, glancing around the lobby. He walked toward the desk, smiling politely, and said, "Hi, I'd like to book a room." Emily's throat went dry as she glanced down. Her hands were no longer covered in blood. She was dressed neatly in the hotel's uniform, her name tag pinned to her chest. And before she could stop herself, her mouth spoke words she didn't choose. "Of course, welcome to our hotel. Room 214 is available." The man smiled, handed her his ID, and she slid the logbook toward him. But when she looked down, she didn't see ink. She saw blood soaking into the pages. She wanted to scream, to warn him, to throw the book away, but her body wouldn't listen. She realized with crushing horror that she hadn't escaped the hotel at all. She had become part of it. The whispers swelled around her, not outside this time, but inside her head, guiding her, controlling her. And as the new guest walked away, keycard in hand, she felt her lips curl into a smile that wasn't her own. The clock ticked forward, the lights buzzed, and somewhere deep inside, Emily's soul screamed in silence because she knew the hotel would never let her leave. She was the new clerk now, the new trap, and every time the door slid open at night, she would be waiting, ready to welcome the next name to be carved into the walls. Closing. People often think ghosts haunt places because of tragedy, because of death. But what if the place itself is alive, feeding, waiting, using us as bait? That hotel still stands by the empty highway, its lights glowing at midnight, its doors sliding open for tired travelers who never question the silence inside. Some check in and never leave, their names etched forever into the walls, their voices becoming whispers in the hall. And if you ever find yourself there, don't ask for room 214, because the clerk behind the counter might smile, hand you a key, and welcome you in. But deep down, you'll know she isn't welcoming you to a room. She's welcoming you to stay
forever.